career.
I was at the back a few times, I have to say.
So there's Kevin Magnussen just sitting down having a little concentrate. What did did it change anything for you? Did you think it was an opportunity?
What do you mean?
Starting at the back?
It's starting at the back. No, it's not an opportunity, really, is it? I mean, it's basically a lack of opportunity. But there's the people even worse off than the people who are at the back, and they're in the pit lane. They're not even on the grid, so they're missing all of this entertainment and excitement. But we've got Kevin Magnussen. You were just talking about him sitting down there. He's chatting to his engineer now. But he'll be getting all his thoughts in a row. You know, he'll be trying to clear his head of all the extraneous clutter and thoughts. But he's got a job to do. It's not like he's on pole position. There's a big difference of mindset between being down there and a pole position. He's just looking around him thinking, who am I likely to encounter going down through turn one? And, you know, whether I'm going to be aggressive or defensive and all those things.
Okay, so now we've got an extra 10 minutes. A lot of the drivers have actually left the grid. They tend to leave the grid anyway. Did you want to talk to your engineer all the time, or did you, like Kevin, want to have a little time for yourself?
No, I was always there. If anything that was relevant to my job was needed to be discussed, then the engineer was always there, and I could always, you know, most of the information is coming to you, so they're usually coming to you and saying, we've got a small problem with whatever it is, you know, start procedure or whatever, but you know, we'll fix that, don't worry about that, or we're just fixing something on the ECU or software bug, and then you get a lot of stuff that's, so you know what is happening. And then you don't get them coming up to you and saying, now don't forget the clutch is on the left or anything like that.
Yeah, James Vowles is here, of course, the team boss of your old team Williams. Williams have only ever had 3 team bosses.
Yes.
Frank Williams.
No, really?
Yes, Frank Williams, Jost Capito. Claire Williams was never the team boss, she was always deputy. And this man, James Vowles.
James, you've settled in nicely, and they're also shown some good performance now with the car. Can you tell us where that has come from?
So I think I'm still settling in. Many more months in front of me for that one. But in terms of where we are, you highlighted it. I was just literally walking past a Williams and a Mercedes lined up on the grid together at the same time. Now, we've got to keep our feet on the ground. In qualifying, when the grip comes up, it masks some of the behaviors of this car. So we can get quite a good lap time out of it. Come the race, especially now, it's quite warm. The track temperature will come up. I think you're going to see, unfortunately, that we just dropped back relative to the others in front of us. That said, it's Baku, and there's huge amounts of opportunity ahead of us here. I'd be surprised if we don't walk through with multiple BSC safety cars and maybe even something more than that. And really, we're going to keep our nose clean, make sure we do everything that we can to optimize the position, and points should fall our way, hopefully, as a result.
Points will be falling your way.
Well, I mean, falling's the wrong terminology, but what I'm really trying to say here is the top 4 teams, top 5 teams really, are exceptional. And to break into the points now, you need everything to be perfect, or situations that fall your way.
Well, the qualifying went well for Albon anyway, so we'll be watching your progress.
Great.
Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks very much, James. Thanks for that. Have a good race. Was there ever a tell us a Williams story. Come on.
Oh, there are so many. I mean, the one that comes to mind is when we were on the grid at Monaco, another street circuit, and there was a hint of rain, and Patrick stood in front of the car. Patrick Head, who was the technical director of Williams, stood in front of the car and caught my eye and said, Damon, there's rain coming from the sky. And of course, where else does rain come from? But anyway, I got what he meant. And so that was basically a warning that we may be going to, you know, starting on slicks in a wet condition or whatever.
I mean, in my head, remembering you in that Williams, sometimes you'd sit in the car, sometimes you'd get out. You didn't like to do too many interviews. How did you feel about doing interviews on the grid?
I was very happy to be interviewed, Ted. Where did this rumour come from?
I don't know. No, just remembering from, you know.
Well, you're focused. You know, you're in the zone, so it's a question of whether you think you've got the mental space to say, OK, now I'm relaxed and I can talk. I know Jensen was very good at getting out and talking and having a strange kind of ritual with him and Martin.
Well, you talk, yes, to do with, we're not going to mention what that is. Some people do have rituals, don't they? Gasly does this whole thing about crouching down to the ground, touching the ground, looking up heavenwards. Hulkenberg yesterday, I saw, has a ritual where he goes through the movements he has to do, the buttons he has to press on his steering wheel, and then the sort of clutch release with his hand.
Yes, there was a driver once who was very superstitious, and if ever he saw, if his crutch straps got done up the wrong way, he had to get out and start the whole procedure again, which was obviously time consuming. So It made him concentrate on getting it right. I mean, you do get... there are superstitions out there. You know, there's drivers with little rituals. But mostly they're very professional what they're doing.
Okay, just got a bit of taping up the plank down here at Lance Stroll's car. That's nothing serious, but maybe they've seen a little bit of damage on the bib there. What was the biggest sort of panic you had on one of your cars when there was something terrible on the grid going on, needed fixing quick?
I mean, probably...
like an oil pump or an oil leak or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, things like that, you know. Discovering a leak is the worst one because there's not much they can do about it at that time. But you know, there's a lot of fiddling about that's just to do with routine stuff.
Okay, let's have a look at the Aston Martin. All the mechanics are still with hands on the rear wing flap. Now, it really is the drag reduction system that's compromised the whole of Aston Martin's weekend and is threatening to end Fernando Alonso's run of podiums. Do you think today is the day where the podium run ends for Aston, or would you not bet against Fernando in any condition?
I would never bet against Fernando in any condition, but safety cars were a factor we talked about earlier. That would probably have to come into play, I think, to help these guys get on the podium on merit, because the pace of the guys in front are pretty good. And also, I think you're going to have to put in that Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, as being one of the tougher nuts to crack for Fernando.
Okay, just past Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. He's been suffering all weekend with food poisoning, and actually today is the first day, so McLaren say, that he's felt vaguely human. Have you had that before?
Oh gosh, I had the most awful tummy in Argentina, which I picked up whilst surfing in the outlet of a favela in Sao Paulo in Brazil.
Okay.
Which was a very stupid thing to have done. So I think I swallowed some seawater and spent the next week regretting it.
Right.
But made it through.
We're getting all the stories on Damon's tour guide here, aren't we? Carry on.
They're not very palatable stories, are they? But anyway, tummy trouble in Argentina.
Right. Well, Oscar Piastri is feeling much better, so that's good to hear. Let's talk about Carlos Sainz with Charles Leclerc, who, let's face it, is a Baku expert. That's put Sainz in the shade somewhat. He says there's something wrong with his car. He thinks he knows what it is. Oh. But that's weird, isn't it? He can be shown up in that way. 3 grid slots away from his teammate in an identical car.
Yeah, and I think that Carlos has really not shown that he's very happy with the car for a while. I mean, he does perform well in races. He comes back again in races. So, but you need to have a lot of confidence in your car around a circuit like Baku, and that's where Charles is perhaps able to take the risk. He's able to put himself out there on the end of the branch a little bit further than Carlos can.
Yeah, but also got Sergio Perez directly behind. How long do you think Ferrari can defend this position for?
Well, as we saw in the sprint, unfortunately, not very long, I think. If all things being equal, if Max's car hasn't got a hole in it, which he had in the sprint yesterday, then I think then he's sort of a sitting duck on the straights. And the other factor is tyre degradation. It's hot, it's 42 degrees attack temperature, and that won't help him.
Okay, just finally, let's have a look, Simon, before we throw back to you, at the front suspension, because your old mentor and engineer, Adrian Newey, has spent all of his time on this year's Red Bull and last year's designing the front suspension. I know he's an aero man, but he realized how important getting a stable aerodynamic, stable suspension platform is to the car to help the aerodynamics. So we've got this very high top wishbone there. You see where it meets the #1, and it really helps that you've got a pull rod suspension, obviously, but where that top wishbone meets the #1, the difference between that and the lower one under that T of the sponsor there stops the car from actually diving down on braking, keeping that aerodynamic platform stable. That helps with the DRS as well, and it helps actually with the car's straight line speed. So it's genius what Newey's done to this. I
mean, he makes such beautiful bits on cars. You know, they're effective, but they're also beautiful, and they're sublime because they actually have a function. Design, you know, function dictates form. But I mean, he's not just made suspension that will help the whole car, the platform of the car, but he's helped the aerodynamics because the air has to pass over those suspension parts, and of course if they are interrupting the flow as it gets down further down the car, then you get all sorts of messy air which loses you downforce. So, you know, you might say he's worked on the suspension, but actually he's worked on the aerodynamics.
He has. Okay, great. Well, listen, that is the end of Damon's grid tour. Hope you enjoyed it. As I say, Martin will be back from Miami, but Simon, for the time, did you enjoy that? Back to you. Where are you? Further up the grid?
Oh, yeah.